everyone joining us here today. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. This is the latest installment in what we have called our Open Dialogue series. And with these dialogues, we aim to strengthen the understanding of how the development community, but also United Nations Development Programme, respond to the development needs of the many communities in the countries in which we serve, to help to address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to take us beyond recovery towards the achievement of the Sustainable 2030 goals. As we're all painfully aware of, the world faces an unprecedented threat from COVID-19. And this is most likely also with other ongoing challenges, the most challenging crisis we have faced collectively since the Second World War. It is more than a global crisis. It's an economic crisis, it's a humanitarian crisis. It's also a crisis with regard to security and human rights. And we also see that the pandemic has laid bare severe systemic inequalities. And the UN is particularly concerned about the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 on people and the time it will take us to really move and invest beyond recovery. And we also, of course, are incredibly aware of many of people living in extreme humanitarian crisis already and how this will affect them. Now, last April, in the beginning of the global crisis, the Secretary General released a specific call to put women and girls at the center of the efforts to recover from COVID-19, both as beneficiaries, but also as leaders and equal participants in decision-making, building forward better, building forward differently. And today in our dialogue, we put a spotlight on COVID-19's impact on gender equality and the strategies that UNDP is deploying with our partners to strengthen efforts to build forward towards a more gender equitable society. And we will share findings and evidence from socioeconomic assessments and from our new flagship initiatives, including then UNDP and UN Women Global Response Tracker, which is very interesting. In March, UNDP presented our offer to support countries focusing on an integrated prepare, respond, and recover response to COVID-19 with a focus on three immediate priorities: health system support, multi-sectoral crisis management, and the social impact assessment and response that we started already then. But also based on lessons learned since March, we presented an involved offer in June that we called Beyond Recovery Towards 2030. The offer is oriented around the Secretary General's mandating of UNDP as the technical lead of the UN socioeconomic response, coordinating the effort throughout the system and beyond with all development actors. Today, we have an exciting new topic and upcoming milestone product to share with you. As some of you are aware, this year marks the 30th year since the first Human Development Report was released in 1990. I recall it well. I was a student at the university at that time, and since then I've really looked forward to all the reports coming out and the discussions that always follow them. This milestone offers an opportunity to look back at the fundamental shifts that have taken place in the development world during that time. 27 human development reports have been published to date, applying the human development lens on a wide range of critical issues, including human rights, climate change, gender, and inequality. And moreover, 800 national human development reports have also been released to advance the development thinking and inform policy making at the national level. Now, taking stock of the sheer wealth of knowledge accumulated over the years from these reports is in itself a valuable exercise. But of course, what matters the most is how we can re-articulate the human development framework itself to incorporate new elements and really stay relevant in this rapidly transforming society and in the critical times that we are in. And this forward-looking mindset is especially pertinent in the context, of course, of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, which is compounding existing challenges, including climate change, the biodiversity crisis, and also inequalities. This ambition to tackle a new generation of global challenges guided the 2019 Human Development Report that I hope that you will read and look into if you haven't already. And it will certainly also guide the upcoming 2020 report to be launched very soon at the end of this year. UNDP is mobilizing all our assets to respond to this unprecedented challenge across our global network of 170 countries and territories. And we are an organization that brings the management assets of being fit for purpose, as assessed also in the latest OECD MOPAN performance review. And we are ranked as one of the most transparent development agencies of the world in the Transparency Index. And these open dialogue series are another opportunity to peer into UNDP's response to the crisis. And we are doing so in partnership with others. We want to be a transparent organization, an organization to really open up our assets, our discussions, to really improve the way we are working. And we believe also in these conversations that we can improve as a development community together. But now, without further ado, let me hand over to Pedro Conceição, who is UNDP's Director of the Human Development Report Office, to make a presentation on the new generation of human development reports and, of course, then the latest analysis and data tools. And we have an hour for this dialogue. I will be moderating it, and I will also open up for questions and answers at the end. But also, please make use of the chat box and put your ideas, your questions there, and colleagues also accompanying us from the Human Development Report will also look into them as we speak to be able to have a good conversation with all of you at the end. So over to you, Pedro.
Ulrika, thank you so much for this opportunity to present and discuss the work of the Human Development Report Office. And thank you also to all the colleagues that are joining us for the discussion today. As you mentioned, Ulrika, our office's key responsibility is to produce the Human Development Report, which is that regular reminder that development is about people, about expanding their choices and opportunities. With each report, we try to provide the human development lenses on development challenges that confront all of us. But the report is really the result of multiple consultations, partnerships, and a lot of work that often stays in the background. So we thought that we should structure the dialogue today in a way that gives some exposure to some of that work, so that we show how the offices not only produces a human development report, but how our work also helps to engage and support the organization on priorities such as COVID-19. And also we want to show how the work that we do inspires others across the organization to engage and keep alive the concept of human development that goes much beyond just publishing regularly a human development report. As you mentioned, it's 30 years since the first came out. I've been reminding all of us using Twitter about the human development reports that have been issued, and I will continue to do so. And it's really remarkable to see how much the human development reports over the years introduced important concepts, human security in 94, the importance of gender equality in 95, the very first report that spoke about people being the real wealth of nations. And so I think this gives us an opportunity as we look towards the launch of this year's report on the 15th of December to reflect and take stock on all of that heritage that has been accumulated over the years. So I will want to stop here and give an opportunity to my colleagues to present some of the work that we do. But before I do so, I want to take a moment to thank the Republic of Korea, who has been a strong supporter of our office over the last 2 years. Without that support, we simply could not have done a lot of the work that we will be seeing today. And more recently also GIZ from Germany and the government of Sweden. With that, let me hand over to UNDP's chief statistician, Yan-Chun Zhang, who's going to start us off with a discussion and presentation of the metrics, the measures of human development that we produce and publish yearly in our human development reports. Yan-Chun, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Good morning to you all. Thanks for coming to our webinar. As our director Pedro just mentioned, 2020 is a very special year for us. 30 years ago, UNDP published its first edition of Human Development Report. And in that report, a new measure of well-being, the Human Development Index, HDI, was also introduced to the world. So as you can see from this slide, the Human Development Index is a simple measure of human progress. Then it is a summary measure of achievements in 3 key dimensions: a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living. The HDI is the geometric mean of normalized indices for each of these dimensions. This index is introduced to steer discussions about development progress away from a sole focus on GDP towards a measure that generally assess what is important for expanding humans' freedoms to live the lives people want. HDRO has always recognized the limitations of this simple measure. So that's why over the years, we have rolled over additional indices to capture other critical dimensions of human development. Next slide, please. For example, since 2010, HDRO has published Inequality Adjusted HDI. So it adjusts the Human Development Index for inequality within each of these 3 dimensions. Similarly, HDRO's efforts to measure gender inequalities began in its 1995 HDR on gender, and our recent reports included 2 indices on gender. One is GRI, Gender Inequality Index, which reflects the inequalities in empowerment and well-being between men and women. The other gender index is called Gender Development Index. It reflects the gender inequalities in achievement in 3 basic dimensions of human development.
Gradual loss of hope, that slip sliding.
Can I continue?
Please continue, and we are asking everyone to mute.
Thank you. So in addition to the 3 indices I just mentioned on the previous slide, I also listed a multidimensional poverty index, MPI. We currently publish this MPI every year jointly with Oxford University. Then later, my colleague Cecilia will talk more about MPI. Then in addition to the composite indices we include in our regular publications, we also publish dashboards. Currently, we have 5 dashboards included in our annual reports. They cover different topics. Now, compared to the composite indices where you see a combined measure, then dashboards often allows us the opportunity to look at much longer list of indicators. For example, our dashboard on quality of human development include 14 indicators associated with quality of health, education, and standard of living. Yet there's a lot more to explore. So that's why we have been constantly considering how to measure human development progress better in office. It is very important to mention though, the HDI and the metrics of human development in general are meant as signaling devices that provide policymakers and citizens with information to evaluate policy choices and development performances. So the expansion of human development metrics should be built on a foundation of reflecting original intent of the human development approach as rough and ready measures of how countries fare on indicators that relate to human development and sustainable development goals. So next, my colleague Admir will give a practical example of HDRO's work on COVID-19 responses. So he will present a dashboard that shows how countries are prepared when the pandemic hits. Admir, over to you.
Thank you, Anshun. Thank you so much. So in April, we released 2 dashboards that capture how prepared countries are for pandemic and how vulnerable they are. We presented data in color-coded tables and also in interactive data visualizations that offer a clearer picture and building insights capability. As we saw, COVID-19 has shown that every society is vulnerable to risks and shocks such as pandemic, but some countries offer to suffer much longer and they need longer to recover. These dashboards capture risk factors that are beyond income level, including health and education systems, inequality, social services, and others. Both dashboards have data for human development groups, for regions, and for 189 countries. First dashboard has 9 indicators that are separated into 3 dimensions: level of human development, healthcare system capacity, and connectivity. As we saw in COVID-19 pandemic, connectivity is very important because today hundreds of millions of people still don't have reliable internet access. And to continue working, to continue with education and to interact with others, this connectivity is very important. Next slide. The second dashboard that is on vulnerability includes indicators for 2 dimensions: poverty, social protection, labor programs, and economy's exposure to immediate economic impacts. As we saw that, for instance, when you look at the immediate economic impact, disruption caused by pandemic can impact heavily countries that depend on tourism, on the countries that depend on inflow remittances, or countries that receiving ODAs. We included indicators for all those dimensions. Next slide. And following the release of these dashboards, we collaborated with UNDP country offices in the field to produce national level dashboards on preparedness vulnerability. We also produced regional level dashboards for the Office of Executive Office of Secretary General, and these dashboards were used in SG's regional policy briefs on COVID-19. When we looked at the utility of the dashboards, we see that dashboards were accessed and used in over 170 countries and territories. And now I'm giving floor to my colleague Bettina Barbosa from UNDP in Brazil, and she will present practical insights on how dashboards were utilized in Brazil. Over to you, Bettina.
Thank you, Admir, and special thanks to Director Pedro Conceição for this invitation. So COVID-19 crisis is more than a global health emergency. It is a systemic human development crisis. Our country will be negatively affected by several aspects of economic life and social dimension of development, as well as expected impacts and pressures on environmental dimension especially important for Brazil. Our countries will be affected, but not in the same way. And for Brazil and its 27 states, inequality plays in this context an important role. Following the release of HDRO dashboards, UNDP Brazil head office and the Human Development Unit formed in July 2020 an interagency working group to set up COVID-19 digital data dashboards for Brazil and its 27 states. UNDP, UNICEF, and UNESCO, in consultative partnership with WHO Peru, selected 94 indicators organized into dashboards. Dashboard 1 shows degree of preparation to face COVID-19 challenges, and Dashboard 2 shows profiles of vulnerability in several dimensions of human life. Slide 3, please. In practical manner and focusing on better preparation to respond and recovery action plans, the dashboards aim to address 10 goals. Structure a baseline of indicators for monitoring the impact of COVID-19 in Brazil and states. Select indicators that can be updated annually and are officially recognized. Select indicators that are easy to understand. Help to formulate public policy and to guide recovery. Work with a set of indicators in multi-dimension of development, such as education, health, work and employment, connectivity. Choose indicators that dialogue with the outcomes of the Human Development Report 2019. Highlight measures of inequalities between the Brazil states. Highlight the different development partners and are decisive for recovery capacity. Point out indicators that dialogue with issues such as childhood and gender, and at least launch national dialogue for recovery based on the dashboards. The launch of the digital dashboards is scheduled for early December, and we hope to collaborate strongly for the dialogue and recovery action, considering different federative levels of Brazil. Thank you all for your attention. Over to Cecilia, who will provide a briefing on HDRO multidimensional approach to poverty and how this framework is reflected in our HD indices, including the Multidimensional Poverty Index. Cecilia.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give a very brief description of the Multidimensional Poverty Index, or MPI. The MPI looks at whether people suffer multiple deprivations in 3 dimensions: health, education, and standard of living. And as you can see, these 3 dimensions are the same 3 dimensions included in the Human Development Index. The MPI includes 10 indicators within these 3 dimensions, and these 10 indicators are nutrition and child mortality, years of schooling and school attendance, cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets. The MPI should not be seen as a replacement of income poverty. On the contrary, it should be seen as a complement of monetary measures of poverty. And within the MPI methodology, a person is classified as multidimensionally poor if they are deprived in 1/3 or more of the weighted indicators. For a country to have an MPI, we need microdata or survey data. We include all the countries that have this data that satisfies all the requirements. Countries that do not have a suitable data set cannot be included. This MPI has been published in the Human Development Report since 2010. And in 2018, the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative and UNDP revised and unified the methodology. The MPI estimates and analysis are expected to be updated at least once per year to include newly released data. And since 2019, in addition to releasing the MPI estimates, we also released a separate publication. The publication for 2019 is called Illuminating Inequalities, and the publication released in July this year is called Charting Pathways Out of Multidimensional Poverty. I'm going to stop with the methodological issues because there is no time, but I invite everybody to check the HDRO website, where you can find not only the estimates and the publications, but also technical notes and STATA and R programs that anybody can download and run and replicate the estimates. Next slide, please, and this will be the last one. And to give a very short message on how the Multidimensional Poverty Index works, this is the biggest result or the broadest result. Based on the MPI, we learned that 55% of people in Sub-Saharan Asia are multidimensionally poor, and over 29% of people in South Asia are also multidimensionally poor. The percentages in other regions are smaller. I'm stopping here, and I'm giving the floor to Carolina, who will share HDRO's work on gender-sensitive metrics. And she will give a brief overview of gender indices and dashboards, as well as the Gender Social Norm Index. Thank you. The microphone is yours, Carolina.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Cecilia, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk to you about the gender indices and dashboards that we have in our office. As Jan Chun already talked to us about it, I'm not going to repeat it. But so the main indices that we have is the Gender Development Index, the Gender Inequality Index, and now the Gender Social Norms Index. And in the case of dashboards, we have the Life Course Gender Gap Dashboard, Women's Empowerment Dashboard, and most recently launched the Gender Inequality and COVID-19 Dashboard. I'm going to talk to you today about the two indices that we published in 2020, which is the Gender Social Norms Index and the dashboard. So first, going through the dashboard, as a follow-up to what Avmir already presented, we tried to do these dashboards to relate how the crisis on COVID-19 was going to affect gender inequality. We worked together among the statistics and research team and also with the gender team at UNDP to come up with these two dashboards. On the first one, we show indicators on health, reproductive health, and economics, such as the share of formal and informal employment. And on dashboard 2, which is about safe space, balanced care work, and agency, we show indicators about unpaid care work, violence against women, access to internet and mobile phones, and the share of women in senior management positions and in the parliaments. If we go to the next slide, we can see an example for countries. So for instance, from the first dashboards, we can see how women are at the front lines of the COVID-19 response. You can see in this case for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mongolia, and Zambia. These countries have a high percentage of female medical doctors and nursing personnel. And in the case of the second dashboard, you can see indicators about violence against women. And you can see in the example, Bolivia, Bangladesh, and Sierra Leone have high levels of violence against women. So this data can be actually contrasted with the data presented in the last open dialogue by the gender team with the gender policy tracker. So for example, you can see how if a country has a high representation of medical doctors or nursing personnel, you can check if that country is doing a policy to support this nursing personnel that is mostly female. And if they are not, you can see there's a policy gap in this case. So if we follow to the next slide, I want to talk to you about also about the Gender Social Norms Index, which we published in March of this year, attempting to measure how social beliefs can obstruct gender and women's empowerment. So for this index, we decided to use 4 dimensions on political, educational, economic, and physical integrity. To showcase how you can use this data, I'm gonna use an example. I chose Chile. Even though the global results show bias, Chile was one of the countries that actually improved in biases against gender equality. And in this case, you can see the information you can download online can show you how the bias has changed from one year to another. In the case of Chile, the percentage of population with no bias has actually increased. And then you can look at a snapshot on how every dimension behaves, and you can also see the data disaggregated by sex for women and men. So for example, in the case of Chile, we can see there's more bias in the case of men for every dimension, but then we can look at those dimensions that have greater difference between men and women. So for example, the political or economical. In the case of the political, there's a difference of 12%, and in the case of the economic of 15%. This can also be contrasted with the data that we present in the COVID-19 dashboard. So for example, you can see how Chile is behaving in the political biases and then look at the share of seats of women in the parliament, or you can see what people think about the economic biases, if women and men are good leaders, and then you can see the share of women in senior management positions. With this, I'm gonna close the section on data, and I'm gonna give the floor to John, who's gonna talk to us about the national HDRs and how countries have applied the human development lens across 800 reports in the last 30 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolina. I don't have any slides, but let me just talk about NHDRs, National Human Development Reports, a little bit. Not long after the first global report came out, the first global human development report came out in 1990, UNDP began working with country governments and others at a national level to start reporting human development. These reports have been country-owned, country-led, and they've applied the human development, that people-centered approach, to a great many issues. They put people's lives at the center in many different ways of how we think about development and how we analyze development in a country. As Carolina just said, they've been a real UNDP success story. Over the past 30 years, there have been over 800 reports now from 150 countries, and they've covered almost any topic, any development topic you might imagine, from climate to culture, from political empowerment to public finance. These reports are nearly always run as a collaboration between national government and UNDP, and they often involve other partners too, from civil society, academia, private sector, and elsewhere. While some reports have been topic focused, others have analyzed development issues for a particular segment or part of society. And some of the most interesting reports in the past few years have looked at young people in particular. They've looked at the development challenges young people face, and they've looked at the future they want. Human development reports always have policy recommendations, particularly at the national level. These are really critical to making sure the reports are useful. And these reports have had impacts in a great many ways. Sometimes those impacts have been almost immediate and fairly dramatic, with new ministries created, new legislation introduced. At other times, the impacts are more diffuse. They happen slowly and over time. But when reports collect new primary data, as they often do, and even if they don't, the conversations they trigger generate a different and deeper understanding of what's happening in a country. But indeed, beyond the reports themselves, the process of creating them is also one of the most valuable things, I think. It brings a great many benefits, because by bringing together a group of stakeholders in a country, the report preparation, it starts new conversations, it creates new relationships, and it builds capacity in a country that often doesn't have very much. So the benefits of all this, they can last well beyond, both in time and in breadth, beyond the shelf life of a report itself. Here in the Human Development Report Office, we support national work in different ways around the world. We advise country offices when asked to do so, both on the content of a report, but also on the practicalities of preparing one. We run training events, and we maintain a set of resources that offices can turn to for help. So now let me introduce someone who's actually done this for real on the ground. Rogers Delueo, he's the UNDP's chief economist in Kenya, and he's led national reporting efforts in Kenya and Tanzania, and has a great deal of experience in understanding both the challenges and the benefits that these reports can bring. Over to you, Rogers.
Thank you, John. I think, and good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening. I will try to give a practical examples of how the National Human Development Reports have actually been used at the country level. And I won't actually talk to the first slide, because John has highlighted that. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And I picked a few examples. And the first example is actually a country I worked in before. And I think all of you, if you know, actually, Botswana had this, in the early 90s, had actually this challenge of HIV and AIDS. And what happened there is actually UNDP working together with other stakeholders. In 1997 and 2000, they were actually produced two HDR reports, which actually highlighted, the challenges of HIV AIDS. The first one actually looked at, what will its impact on human development. And the second one, which was produced in 2000, actually was entitled Towards an AIDS-Free Generation. And it actually analyzed, the human development condition in Botswana and its interface with HIV and AIDS. And it made quite some very profound recommendations, to tackle the pandemic, prevent, treat, and develop. And it's actually often cited as the one which influenced actually the president to make sure that, people who were HIV, positive and suffered from this disease actually had access to ARVs. And actually, it's quite encouraging that actually the foreword to this National Human Development Report was actually signed by the president that time, President Foitas Mohai. If you could go to the second slide, please. The next slide. Then I think, the Albania also 2002 and 2006, the NHDR there actually, the 2002 addressed the challenges of local governance and regional development. And the second one, it was actually entitled Pro-Poor and Pro-Women Policies. And these were aligned actually to influence government policy. And what happened out of those initiatives is actually UNDP initiated development programs for Cook, the region with lowest HDI, to which the government allocated 4 million euros provided by the EU. And then in Turkey, the National Human Development Report of 2008 was focused on youth, and it actually influenced youth policy. Let me quickly talk about Tanzania, where I actually, was involved in the process of developing 2 human development reports, which we prepared together with a think tank. They are called Economic Research Social Policy Foundation and the University of Dar es Salaam. The first one was actually in 2014, and the second one is in 2017. And the first one actually was entitled Economic Transformation for Human Development. And the second one was actually social policy in the context of economic transformation. And the major premise of the 2014 NHDR was that for economic transformation to work for human development, the transformation process must actually create decent jobs, income growth, and social provisioning. And actually the 2017 one was actually looking at what social policy do you need, for economic transformation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, and both Tanzanian Human Development Reports of 2014, 2017 influenced policy debates in Tanzania on structural transformation for human development. And the 2014 one is actually cited as having influenced the theme of the National 5-Year Development Plan 2016, 2017 to 2020, 2021, which was actually entitled Nurturing Industrialization for Economic Transformation and Human Development. Actually, that report actually was used as reference material to the drafting team, which actually drafted that plan. Then coming to Kenya, which actually, Kenya is actually the 8th National Human Development Report. The 2017 one actually looked at the relationship between devolution and human development. And I know it has actually shaped the debate on how can we deepen devolution going forward. That is looking at even because what it actually brought out was this, because that report, we calculated all the 47 counties, inequalities among the counties. And when you looked deeper, you find that the counties with higher human development indices actually tended to invest more in actually even in health, in education and so on. So actually, it actually, highlighted what are the challenges in some of these counties. And just, to end actually the human development, the Human Development Index is actually used as actually a component of the formula to allocate revenue to counties in Kenya. So it has actually been institutionalized, and the way we actually prepared the Human Development Report, we actually work quite closely with government institutions and even the National Bureau of Statistics, since the HDI is actually used as a component of the revenue sharing of counties. Well, let me end there, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Rogers. Let's see if you were to hand over to someone, or if not, I would like perhaps Pedro, if you can come back also. And you've also reflected a number of the questions posted, but please go ahead and then we'll invite for more questions and answers.
No, thank you. Ulrika, colleagues, there's been a very active discussion in the chat. I just want to reflect a bit on the work that we did related to COVID-19. So this happened at the time when UNDP was given the responsibility to lead across the UN the process of thinking through the recovery, as Ulrika mentioned. And our contribution was more to understand what was the impact on human development, and we put out a publication to lay out our understanding of the dramatic impact that COVID-19 was having at the time on human development, and release also the dashboards, which provides information. Is not meant to be comprehensive, but at the time that reflected our thinking on vulnerabilities and risk. Now, a key message or intention of those publications was to highlight the importance of policies, of taking action. And in fact, it appears that as a result, not only of those publications, but many similar calls that were made at the time, that there was a very strong policy response in many instances that may have mitigated some of the more negative impacts that were happening at that very high, at the heightened impact of the crisis around April, May. I think it's an example of how the office responds and supports the organization in moments of crisis on behalf of the wider effort that the United Nations system is providing to countries on the response to COVID-19.
Thank you, Pedro. I could see, and we have, and you have with colleagues also answered to a number of questions, but there were, of course, a number of questions with regard to the complexity that we're facing, also referring to the climate crisis, the uneven and unproportional responsibility that developing countries have to take, biodiversity crisis, and also development finance onwards, given also difficulties that many of the middle-income countries have. So you also then referred to the upcoming Human Development Report, but could you share some ideas also how you're looking at both development finance, but also in a changing world, but also with regard to how we are to integrate also climate and biodiversity?
So, yes, that's going to be central to the 2020 Human Development Report. And one of the aspects that we look at in some detail is how the world of finance is changing. And there are many dimensions to this changing world of finance. It spans the role of financial regulators and monetary authorities, in some cases central banks, to the private side, the differences that we're seeing in the world of investment, in the kind of demands investors are making increasingly to know that their allocations are not being used in activities that are considered by them unsustainable or in some cases unethical also. So it's a rapidly changing world. UNDP is heavily engaged in other aspects by other teams. But we knew in our office and in the report, we are looking at the implications of this changing world of finance for human development as it relates precisely to these challenges of sustainability.
Thank you. Let's see if we have, I could see that we had Luca Renda also raising the hand. Let's see if we can also open up if you would like to come in, if we have technical support also to bring in some live questions. If Luca is still with us. And Ricky, if you can be of support to unmute. Not sure if it works. If not, oh, so Luca has left us. we would invite him and any of you, of course, also to follow up, as we've been saying also with colleagues, if there are even more specific questions. I don't see more questions, but Pedro, then maybe as we have a couple of minutes left, would you like also to invite some of the colleagues also to elaborate a bit on the questions that have been asked so far? And please, those of you who are online and still have questions or ideas also, please bring them forward in the chat box, and we'll bring them to the attention of Pedro and team. But if you would like to invite more colleagues also to come back into the discussion, please do so.
Sure, Ulrika. So there was a question about our thinking on MPI and environmental issues and climate. This was actually something that we addressed in the publication this year. So maybe I will ask Cecilia to say a few words on that, if possible. And there was a question also on marginalized groups, the issue of rights. Maybe Carolina can elaborate a bit more on the work that we're doing on gender. And these were topics that we addressed quite extensively in the report last year, the 2019 Human Development Report on inequalities. But zooming in on gender, which we treated in detail, not only because of its intrinsic importance, but also as an illustration of the challenges that relate to intergroup inequalities, what's called in the technical literature horizontal inequalities. So not only inequalities in income across individuals, but across different groups that are treated quite differently in society. So maybe I will ask Cecilia and Carolina to say a few more words, if that's okay.
And if I also can ask you, Pedro, also to, because of course everyone is curious, I mean, what we're measuring, the discussions we're having, how will they lead us also to the achievement to move beyond recovery towards also the sustainable development goals? That's a question we have at the end.
Cecilia, I don't know if you want to...
Yes, sure, I'm here. I wasn't sure where to... With regards to the question on the MPI and the environment, there is a section on the publication from this year. The publication is available online, and something that I did not mention, but this year's MPI publication, it's also available in French and Spanish. So for the first time, we have the MPI book in 3 languages. And to answer the question on the environment, there is a section that tries to measure the impact of environment and the MPI using the 3 indicators that are part of the MPI, but are also related to the environment. And these 3 indicators are drinking water, sanitation, and cooking fuel. And you will see in the publication that numbers are presented, and these numbers tell the percentage of people who are poor and who are also deprived in at least one of these 3 environmental indicators. And as a big conclusion, or as a big result, people in sub-Saharan Africa suffer the most disadvantage, but you can also see the numbers for the other regions. But as a general response to this question, this is the answer. You will find more details on the publication.
Thank you, Carolina.
Yes. So I can talk a little bit about the analysis on ethnicity, LGBT, and disability. So if you go to the 2019 report, you're gonna see we have a whole chapter in gender, and there's a section where we speak about intersectionality and how different identities intersect for inequalities. We are bounded by the available data, so that's a problem. The other times that I have presented the social norms index, this has also came out, especially for LGBT population, because if we don't have the data to identify them, then how can we present the different inequalities or biases against them. So this is one of our main challenges. And also if you look at the COVID-19 and human development, assessing the crisis and visioning recovery, the latest publication, you can see different analysis of differences on inequalities that COVID-19 has caused by ethnicity and also by gender. And on the next materials that we're gonna have for the HDR 2020, we are also considering these groups. So we have done a lot of work on this, but I think it's still bounded by the available data we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pedro, would you like also, I think we don't have more questions in the chat box besides how this is also going to help us to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. But we do have the invitation on behalf of your colleagues also to follow up more in detail. So that's of course a possibility, and we have posted a number of links also where you will find a lot of the answers to the questions you're having. But over to you, Pedro, and then I think it's time for us to round up.
Thank you, Ulrika. Yes, absolutely. The aspiration with the 2020 HDR is to look at the challenges of advancing human development in a world in which we are confronting a new set of challenges, of which COVID-19 is the latest example, that have to do in a way with the pressures that human activity is putting on the planet. And that in the response, in the way in which we choose to respond, including in the short term, in the allocation that we make, for instance, to the major fiscal packages that have been mobilized to help societies and economies to respond to the crisis, there are choices that can be made that would lead us towards much more sustainable investments and more inclusive societies, as opposed to continuing to support activities that are unsustainable. So that is something that we will treat in quite detail in the 2020 HDR, linking once again this moment in time and this opportunity that we are all confronting with the broader and longer term challenges of sustainability that we've been living with for some time now.
Thank you so much, Pedro, and thank you so much to colleagues from the Human Development Report Office for this possibility to interact with you, but also for opening up for continuous discussions. And we had the question at the end whether we would also share what we have shared in the chat box. I'm not sure we will do that, but you will of course be able to contact our colleagues in the Human Development Report Office, and you find them on the web page if you have any additional questions. As I said in the beginning, this is one in a series of conversations that we have had called the Open Dialogue Series on behalf of UNDP, where we would like to create platforms so that you can also accompany us as we develop our work, and also be part of really also with your questions and ideas, also strengthen the offer of UNDP as a global organization. And of course, then also on behalf of the colleagues in the Human Development Report Office, how we can improve also the reports that really lay ground, as we know, for really important discussions, but not only discussions, as we have seen also policy change taking place. So they have been, and they will continue to be an incredibly important tool, I think, for the global international community as we are advancing and need increasingly to rethink how we advance the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, as we are now also with the situation on the pandemic, but also a number of other issues that we've pointed to, not least in the latest Human Development Report, going somewhat in reverse in some areas when we do have to advance the way we understand our world and the actions that we need to take. Very happy to have all of you online, and once again, thanks to all colleagues in the Human Development Report Office led by Pedro. We are very much looking forward to the launch of the next report. Do accompany us and see to that we can make full use of all the interesting understanding that we will have of the world, but not least how to deal with this quite problematic world of ours. So with these words, we're going to close this session, but you are always able to contact the Human Development Report Office through the website where you find the contact details, but also, of course, UNDP, and there the Bureau for External Relations and Advocacy is also a good entry point for you when you want to find your way throughout our organization with presence in so many different countries. So thank you for this, and looking forward to see you also in the upcoming dialogue series, where we are going to continue to engage and share our information. Also, we would like to point to the possibility to engage also on a strategic plan process. There is a Spark Blue platform where you can also accompany UNDP and our broad range of partners in a number of discussions with regard to the future of development. We'll close by send you that link so you can find your way to these interesting discussions, and I'm looking forward to see you next time again. Thank you so much.